The text message arrived on Christopher's phone on a quiet Tuesday morning, years after he'd thrown the number away. It contained only 2 words: "I'm sorry." Christopher paused, tracing the faint, jagged scar low on his spine, a phantom reminder of the bullet that had once ended his world. He was standing on the porch of his own ranch, the scent of hay and strong coffee replacing the stench of city smoke. He knew instantly who it was, and the quiet, solid peace of his life with Sergio suddenly felt threatened by the ghost of the past. The strength in his legs, the home he had built, the profound love he cherished, all of it was constructed on the ruin that man had left behind. But the story didn't start with healing. It started with the dazzling illusion of love in the city. The low lighting of the Monarch Bar was designed for forgotten boundaries, the kind of darkness where 2 strangers could pretend their meeting was an accident of fate, not a calculated search for escape. Christopher nursed his second craft beer, letting the city's frantic energy drain away. Then he saw him, Hank, tall, sharp-edged, successful, and wearing a smile that promised exactly the kind of temporary, thrilling distraction Christopher needed after a hellish work week. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from witty observations about the stock market to intimate revelations about their complicated families, building a bridge of shared vulnerability with surprising speed. By closing time, the meaningless hookup they both silently agreed upon felt anything but a casual encounter. They drove to Hank's house, a cozy, dimly lit apartment with a breathtaking view of the city's electric sprawl. The door hadn't been fully closed before they were in each other's arms, the restraint of the evening dissolving into a visceral hunger. That night was a combustion of pent-up need and surprising tenderness. Clothes were shed hastily, leaving a trail from the hall to the bedroom. Their shared climax was a primal, breathless moment where Christopher felt Hank's grip tighten fiercely on his hips, their bodies moving with a desperate, unified rhythm that felt suspiciously like destiny. They spent the remainder of the night wrapped up, their skins slick and warm, the silence punctuated only by their easy breathing and the distant siren songs of the city. Christopher left before dawn, the city still cloaked in gray, focused intently on only one thing: coffee and escape before reality set in. But by the time the hangover hit him with the force of a freight train, reality was cruel. He hadn't bothered getting a number. He couldn't remember the exact street, only the general neighborhood. It had only been a hookup, Christopher told himself, trying to rationalize the ache of loss, but his heart didn't listen. For 3 agonizing months, Christopher haunted the Monarch, nursing single beers, waiting for a flash of Hank's distinct profile, replaying every line of dialogue in his head. He never appeared. Dejected, Christopher eventually gave up, resigning himself to the cruel efficiency of missed connections. Then, 6 months later, amidst the glaring fluorescent light of the local supermarket's gourmet aisle, Hank stood, debating artisanal cheeses. Christopher froze, adrenaline slamming into his system. He knew instinctively there would be no second chance to lose him. He walked up, delivered a clumsy line about better cheese selection, and secured Hank's number with a hand that shook slightly with the force of relief. Hank was genuinely thrilled. Their second meeting felt like the real beginning, validating the intense spark of their first night. The chemistry had been a preview. Now it was the main feature. They started dating immediately, spending days exploring the city and nights consumed by a fiery, relentless intimacy. Their apartment became their sanctuary, a velvet-lined escape where professional stress dissolved the moment the key turned. They moved beyond hookup intensity into deep, lasting affection, their lives quickly intertwining. Weekends were spent hitting underground city museums, attending jazz concerts in smoky back rooms, and searching for the best Thai street food the boroughs had to offer. They easily integrated into each other's social circles. Christopher adored Hank's dry, confident humor around friends, and Hank was fiercely proud to introduce Christopher to his parents. Their intimacy was defined by both raw intensity and easy vulnerability. Every night was a return to the safety of each other's touch, a space where they could strip away their professional armor. They explored every inch of each other's bodies, finding comfort and pleasure in the simplest of touches, the slow tracing of a fingertip along a spine, a comforting weight of a hand resting on a hip during sleep. Their lovemaking was often unhurried and deeply sensual, focusing on mutual satisfaction and profound physical reassurance. They learned each other's slightest sounds of pleasure and moments of hesitation in the dark. Their favorite ritual became the quiet post-coital moments, lying skin to skin, Hank often shirtless, his chest rising and falling beneath Christopher's ear, whispering secret ambitions and childhood fears. This physical honesty built an emotional trust that felt utterly unbreakable, founded on the thrilling chaos of city life. They began planning their future with tangible enthusiasm. They took weekend trips to the coast, arguing playfully over the merits of city versus country retirement. "We have to have a balcony big enough for a grill no matter where we end up," Hank would insist, already mapping out the furniture. "And Christopher has to have a library floor to ceiling in whatever perfect house we find," Christopher would counter, always ending the argument with a promise to find that perfect house one day. They talked seriously about adopting a rescue dog, a lab Christopher secretly preferred, and even cautiously explored the idea of marriage someday. The entire year was spent building a meticulously crafted, shared future based on comfort, success, and desire.
A year into their committed, loving life together, everything changed. Christopher was walking home late one evening when two thieves ambushed him in a dark alley. In the chaos and the struggle for his briefcase, a gunshot rang out. Christopher woke up days later in a stark white hospital bed, the smell of disinfectant replacing the scent of Hank's skin. Hank's tear-streaked face hovered above him, a mask of sheer panic. The physical damage was extensive. The bullet had caused spinal trauma, leaving Christopher paralyzed from the waist down. The transition was brutal. The physical therapy center in the city was cold and clinical, mirroring Christopher's despair. Hank, initially devastated, tried heroically to be the perfect rock, managing medical appointments and caregiving duties. He fought his fear valiantly for weeks, sacrificing his professional life and social time. But the reality of constant physical dependency, the heavy lifting, the unflinching, ceaseless needs, the draining loss of the spontaneous, easy life they had planned, broken. Christopher needed a lover, but Hank had been forced into the role of a nurse, and he couldn't sustain the performance. The intimacy was replaced by clinical care, and the deep fear eroded his affection. 3 months into Christopher's paralysis, Hank confessed he couldn't do it anymore. "I can't be what you need," Hank admitted, tears finally falling, his face pale with panic and overwhelming guilt. "I'm not strong enough for this. I love you, but I can't live this life." He left, choosing the easy exit over the grueling commitment. Christopher's world shattered again. He begged, pleaded, and contacted Hank relentlessly, his desperate voicemails filled with the pain of a double loss, his legs and his love. Hank remained coldly distant, eventually blocking Christopher's number. The final, brutal blow came via a lawyer's letter. Hank had filed a restraining order and moved out of the city entirely, cementing the finality of the abandonment. Christopher lay alone, the silence of the apartment deafening, the financial pressure of the city mounting with every specialized piece of equipment and every unanswered medical bill. He felt utterly disposable. Isolated, physically limited, and financially ruined by the high medical and living costs of the city on disability income, Christopher had nowhere left to turn. He packed the remnants of his life and moved to the only place he had ever truly felt safe, the sprawling horse stables in the countryside, owned by his loving grandparents. The ranch was an escape from concrete and sterile glass, trading the relentless noise of the city for the low thud of hooves and the comforting smell of hay and pine. The stables, though beautiful, initially felt like a vast, cruel prison. The uneven, rugged ground made maneuvering his wheelchair a constant, frustrating battle against inertia and friction. One afternoon, determined to reach the distant south paddock, Christopher's wheelchair sank deep into a muddy rut near the wooden fence line. He struggled, his shoulders burning with futile effort, fighting back tears of sheer frustration and humiliation. The freedom he sought in the country seemed just as unattainable as it had been in the city. Just as he was about to give up, a shadow fell over him. A man on a large chestnut horse, Rojo, stopped beside the fence. This was Sergio. Sergio was pure cowboy, lean, rugged, wearing dusty jeans and a worn leather hat with an easy confidence and clear, steady eyes that held the sky. He dismounted smoothly, treating Christopher's plight not with pity, but with simple, matter-of-fact practicality. "Rough terrain for those tires," he observed, effortlessly lifting the back of the chair and rolling it onto firmer dirt. "You okay?" Christopher, embarrassed by his vulnerability, kept his eyes downcast, the shame hot on his face. "Yeah, thanks. I should have stuck to the gravel," he mumbled, despising his dependency. Sergio leaned against the fence, arms crossed, his gaze patient. He didn't rush or pry, just waited for Christopher to stabilize himself. "Nah, gotta see the property, right? Name's Sergio. I work the north pasture mostly." "Christopher. My grandparents just brought me out here from the city." "Welcome to the sticks, Christopher. City life can get you bogged down one way or another," Sergio said. His words, though simple, acknowledged Christopher's situation without dwelling on the pity, offering genuine empathy instead. To change the subject, he gestured to a nearby mare. "She's a tough one. Took me 3 weeks to get her right with the bridle. You seem like you know horses." A genuine smile, the first Christopher had worn in months, flickered across his face. "I used to grow up around them. This place used to be my favorite. I used to ride an old gray gelding named Traveler years ago." That shared connection became their bridge. Sergio didn't shy away from Christopher's disability. Instead, he drew him back into the world he loved. He invited Christopher to watch him work, offering hours of quiet distraction, pulling Christopher out of his isolated room and into the vibrant, purposeful rhythm of ranch life. He taught Christopher the names of the herds, the rhythm of the seasons, and the quiet satisfaction of hard, honest work. More importantly, Sergio gently taught Christopher new ways to interact with the horses safely, having Christopher sit on a low stool to groom the animals, building upper body strength and core stability, and more crucially, his sense of purpose. Sergio's steady patience was a balm. It was the opposite of Hank's escalating anxiety, proving that commitment could be quiet, consistent, and unconditionally supportive.
The bond between Christopher and Sergio deepened into unshakable trust. Sergio's steady presence was the quiet antithesis to Hank's sudden, fearful abandonment. But before they could explore the true potential of their romantic connection, Christopher needed a major checkup, requiring a painful trip back to a specialized city hospital. They were in the sterile, crowded waiting room when the past collided with the present. Hank walked past, his arm looped with a woman's. Christopher realized with a sickening jolt she was clearly pregnant, a future secured that he had once been promised. Hank, spotting Christopher and Sergio, offered a cold, quick glance before quickly steering his wife down a different corridor. Christopher felt the rush of shock and the dull ache of sadness. Seeing Hank's hand protectively placed on the pregnant woman's stomach confirmed the final, utter detachment from the life he had lost. He saw the future Hank had chosen, and though it hurt, the pain was muted by the comforting, grounded presence of Sergio beside him. Moments later, a piece of news changed everything. During his exam, his doctor, Dr. Chen, entered the room with a confident smile. "Christopher, your initial injury healing is textbook. We have a complex new procedure, a neurospinal reconstructive surgery that, given your clean bill of health otherwise, has an excellent chance of restoring functional mobility. Christopher wept silent tears of pure, desperate joy. Tears not of sorrow, but of fierce, sudden hope. The nightmare was ending. Christopher immediately agreed. Sergio didn't hesitate, his eyes shining with pride. "I'll be there every step, Chris. I'll take care of everything," he promised, his commitment echoing the loyalty Hank could not provide. The surgery went exceptionally well, and after a difficult hospital stay, Christopher and Sergio returned to the stables. A local physiotherapist, Martha, began working with Christopher consistently, pushing him through painful, exhausting exercises. Sergio became his devoted, non-complaining caregiver. The strength and patience he displayed, making Christopher realize he was already deeply in love with this quiet, steadfast cowboy. The months that followed were defined by grueling, painful effort, where every muscle fiber screamed in protest, but Christopher pushed through, fueled by Sergio's quiet encouragement. He started with tiny movements, graduated to leg braces, and then to a walker. Every inch gained was a victory celebrated only by their shared, knowing glances. Then came the day. Christopher stood alone, unsupported, leaning against the kitchen counter, his breath hitching in his throat. He took a hesitant step, then another, stronger. It wasn't graceful. It was a miracle of determined, shaky intention, the old farmhouse floorboards groaning under the weight of his triumph. Soon he was walking well, his body whole again, his heart overflowing with gratitude and fierce joy. In a surge of pure, ecstatic triumph, Christopher spun around, abandoning the counter for good, and captured Sergio's mouth in a kiss. It was long, fueled by gratitude, relief, and undeniable love, the confirmation of every quiet emotion that had been building between them since the day Sergio pulled his chair from the mud. The past was over. The future was now. With his mobility fully restored, Christopher threw himself back into riding again, now with a passion that bordered on fierce determination, a way to reclaim the freedom the bullet had stolen. Sergio helped him adapt, rebuilding his balance and stamina. 3 months after he started walking again, Christopher decided to enter a small regional para-equestrian dressage competition, a final symbolic victory. "You really think I can do this?" Christopher asked one evening, his voice laced with the old fear of failure, the fear Hank had fled. Sergio, perched casually on the fence, simply smiled, his confidence absolute. "You already walked out of a wheelchair, Chris. Riding a horse is just showing off now. Rojo trusts you, and I trust you," he affirmed, his belief a solid anchor. The day of the competition was a blur of nerves and excitement. Christopher guided his horse, executing the required patterns with precision and grace, the movement flowing through his restored limbs. When his score was announced, enough for a second-place ribbon, Christopher's throat choked up with emotion. It wasn't just a physical achievement. It was a public declaration of his independence and total recovery. Sergio, meeting him at the gate, didn't need words. He just wrapped him in a powerful hug, the scent of horse and leather and Sergio's skin filling Christopher's senses. The kiss they shared was raw and triumphant, sealing the moment in an unforgettable declaration of their enduring strength.
Their love blossomed in the peace of the countryside. Now that Christopher was healed, their intimacy was a celebration of his regained strength and their shared journey. The joy of their physical connection was profound. They explored every aspect of their desire, the soft hay of the barn floor sometimes cushioning their passionate embraces, the earthy scent of horse and leather mingling with their sweat. Sergio's hands, strong and calloused from ranch work, moved over Christopher's newly mobile body with reverence, exploring the contours that had once felt so fragile and inaccessible. Christopher, no longer defined by his injury, responded with an open, fierce passion, reveling in the sensation of every touch and the power of his own mobility. Their sex life was deep, sensual, and built on the absolute trust that only comes from supporting a partner through tragedy. The city life was fulfilling, but the peace of the ranch was where their hearts belonged. After several successful years working in the city, Christopher had resumed his career as a financial analyst, bringing his methodical mind to bear on complex markets and easily securing a high-paying position thanks to a stellar reputation. The call of the high country was too strong. They wanted the quiet space, the horses, and the constant grounding satisfaction of physical labor. 1 year into their city residency, Christopher faced a new, non-physical crisis. The venture he had been hired to manage, a high-stakes fund investing in disruptive tech, collapsed due to an unexpected regulatory change and a rapid market shift. It took months of work and significant client funds with it, forcing his company to liquidate the division. He was cleared of wrongdoing, but the loss was immense. The failure was not just financial, it was existential. Christopher was haunted by the echoes of his past, feeling the old, paralyzing terror of being broken and useless. He spent 2 weeks drowning in self-recrimination, sleeping poorly and avoiding the office. "I'm a failure, Sergio. I can't even stand up financially." "It's happening again," Christopher confessed one evening, his voice hollow with despair, sinking into a depression that eerily mirrored his physical paralysis years earlier. "I should have stayed on the ranch. I'm fundamentally flawed. I can't sustain success or happiness." He felt an overwhelming urge to retreat, to pull the covers over his head and cease moving, just as he had in the hospital after Hank left. Sergio found Christopher sitting alone in their dark living room, laptop closed, the city lights reflecting coldly in his eyes. He didn't offer empty platitudes or market advice. He simply walked over, knelt down on the carpet, and took Christopher's face in his strong, weathered hands, forcing eye contact. "Look at me, Chris. That failure is paperwork. It's a spreadsheet. It's a bad bet on a volatile market. It is not your spine." Sergio spoke with quiet steel, emphasizing the critical difference. "It's not your heart. You got up and walked after a bullet severed your cord. You went back to the ranch and rode a horse in competition. You think a bad quarter defines you?" "It doesn't," Sergio answered for him, his voice firm and loving. "You are the strongest person I know. You proved you can recover from the impossible. Now, you prove you can recover from the ordinary. You don't fail, you learn." "We leave first thing tomorrow morning. We go home this weekend. We get dirt under our nails and we spend time with Rojo. And then we try again on Monday, because you are not broken." They spent the entire weekend at the grandparents' ranch, Christopher focusing on mucking stalls and riding Rojo until his muscles ached from honest work, not trauma. The simple, repetitive strains cleansed his mind. By Sunday night, he felt the grounding effect of the earth and Sergio's unconditional love wash away the shame. The professional failure was painful, but it didn't break him. Their commitment was proven in a way Hank could never have managed, not just caregiving through physical trauma, but unwavering emotional backbone through crushing existential despair. With his perspective restored, Christopher quickly landed in a new, more stable position, realizing he no longer needed the high-pressure environment to validate his worth. The city, however, had done its job. It had shown him he could thrive, but it wasn't where his peace resided. They purchased their own property, a beautiful working ranch that blended stables and pasture, the perfect hybrid of their two worlds. It was their forever home. They had just finished moving their furniture into their new spacious farmhouse when the ghost of the past returned. Hank reached out via an old email address. The message was one of raw desperation, a confession of his recent tragedy. Hank had divorced his wife. The pressure of impending fatherhood had been too much, compounded by the devastating loss of the baby via stillbirth just weeks before. His life had crumbled, and he was consumed by regret, not just for his recent losses, but for abandoning Christopher. He wrote that he had been a coward, and he was looking for any scrap of comfort or forgiveness, having heard rumors of Christopher's impossible recovery. Christopher read the message while Sergio made coffee in the next room, the scent of fresh grounds filling their new home. He felt a profound pang of sorrow, not for his own suffering, but for Hank's crushing fate. There was no anger, no vengeance, only a vast, quiet compassion. The man Hank was, now a hollow shell of the man Christopher had loved, and Christopher realized he had truly moved on. He was thankful for the tragedy, in a way, because it had led him to Sergio. Christopher replied with a single text, "I wish you peace, Hank." He deleted the message string and walked into the kitchen, leaning against the counter and watching Sergio's steady hands measure coffee grounds. "Everything all right?" Sergio asked, his gaze gentle, his trust absolute. He didn't need to read the message to know who it was from. Christopher smiled, a real, full-hearted smile. "Perfectly all right, just closing a very old chapter. We're home now," he affirmed, leaning in for a slow, reassuring kiss. They married a year later in a simple ceremony, standing before the large wooden barn they had built together, their friends and Christopher's grandparents as witnesses. Christopher, now physically stronger and emotionally whole, stood easily exchanging vows with Sergio, the man who had taught him to live and love again. They retired quietly into the rhythm of the ranch, their days defined by the sun setting over the high grasses and the easy, sustaining love of two men who had learned that true commitment wasn't measured by comfort, but by standing steady when the world falls apart. Christopher was finally, truly home.